We're so glad that you are here, so glad that you have joined with us this morning. It's, again, such an incredible time in the church world as we are in the season. Some people are like, oh, this is the Super Bowl for the church. Every day is the Super Bowl for the church because, that's just what Jesus does, right? And that's the way we need to see it. But it is that time, and, Palm Sunday and all of those things. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But I do want to give you a little bit of information about some things that are happening this week, just so that they are on your radar and you can register for those. Again, if you're not already on the church app, go to whatever device you have. Go to where you get your apps. Look up Church Center. You can find the app. You can check in here at Hope Chapel Legends. You can find everything you want to know about who we are, what's going on. You can register for these events, and it's just a great way to stay in contact and stay in touch. But again, this is the Passion Week, right? This is the Passion Week, and so we have a couple things going on that we want you to know about. Of course, Good Friday is the next big service. Please come and attend. It's a beautiful service. It's a beautiful service. It's if you've never attended a Good Friday service that just dealt with Friday, because we're only going till Friday. We're not going into Sunday yet. To set in the awareness of the cross, to set in the awareness of all that He did for us, and to leave that place in that kind of attitude. It's a beautiful, heartfelt thing. So we encourage you to come and be a part of our Good Friday service. There are flyers and information out on the tables out there, again, on the Church Center app. And then, of course, Easter Sunday morning, 10 a.m. We are looking forward to such an incredible crowd and just a great day. After that service, we are going to be hosting an event for our kids. Normally, we do a large egg hunt on Saturday, but we're shifting that this year. Hopefully, we can see a lot more people come to Easter service. Hopefully, we can get a lot more kids hearing the gospel message. And so that will be taking place immediately following. Now, here's where we're at. We've already got 5,000 eggs filled. Hopefully, they've all been returned. We're not assuming that if you didn't return them that you've eaten the candy. We're not assuming that yet. If it doesn't come back pretty quick, we are going to assume that. But, hey, what we've got is we've got 2,000 eggs packed up. That if we could just, because we've done some great marketing, some great promotion on this, we're starting to get a little bit of feedback that we might have a very good crowd. So if you want to take just some empty eggs with you today, you can see Braden afterwards. Our trellis intern Braden will be back there. And if you can get some candy, put them in them, fill them up. We just want to make sure that we really, really bless our community. And then, so we will be doing that immediately following our Sunday service. So plan now, invite your friends, your nephews, your nieces, neighborhood kids. Please don't just pick them up off the street. We don't want to deal with that. But ask their parents if they can come. So a lot of good things going on. And we look forward to this week as we celebrate the greatest thing that ever happened in our lives. And that's Jesus. Well, we have been, since the beginning of the year, we have been going through the Bible, just walking through the Bible, starting at the very first page of Genesis. We started at Genesis 1:1, and we've been walking through the Scripture. We've called this series Essential because here's what we believe. We believe that the truths that are found in the Bible are the very essentials of living a life that is free, living a life that is flourishing, and living a life that is filled with purpose. So when we talk about the Bible, it's not just another book. It's not just a book of stories. It's not just a Christian book. It's not just a church book. We truly believe that within the pages of Scripture, we find the essentials of life. We find the things that make life free, that give us the ability to live life in a flourishing way in the midst. It doesn't mean that you're not going to ever experience difficulty. But in the midst of difficulty, we can still flourish. and that we can be filled with purpose and we can fulfill the purpose that God has given us. And so it's the story of how God is continually making places where he can meet with people. God desires to be in your life. God desires to be with people. God is not some far off, distant, nebulous power that is just waiting for you to mess up so that he can take you out. God wants to be in your life. He wants to meet with us on a daily basis. So the Bible is the story of how God is continually making places where he can meet with people, broken people, hurting people, everyday people, and help them fulfill the purpose that he has in their lives. So we started the month of April, and we entered into a very interesting, somewhat disturbing book. If you remember back in March, reading through Judges, you probably thought, this is insane. These people are nuts. Have they lost their minds? Because there are things that happen in the book of Judges that you're just like, that should be on a true crime podcast. You know? You're like, what are these? These are godly people. What are they doing, right? That's kind of the book of Judges, right? It's insane. These people are living in utter chaos. And if you thought that, you were right. You actually were right. Things were out of control for the nation of Israel, the people of God who had been freed and blessed, because they were now behaving like every other nation around them. And I'll tell you why that happened. It happened for 3 reasons. The first was they didn't take all of the distractions and the obstacles out of their lives. See, God had given them a mandate to move into the territory that he had given them, and they were to make sure that every obstacle, that every distraction, that every nation who served other gods was to be removed. And in Judges 2, it says, the angel of the Lord said, I brought you out of Egypt, and I led you into a land I swore to give to your ancestors. I said, I will never break my covenant with you. That was God's promise. He said, and you shall not make a covenant with the people of this land. In other words, you are not going to build a fence with your neighbor. You're not going to come alongside them. You're not going to make a covenant with them. And you shall break down their altars. You're going to change how worship happens. And then he says this, but you disobeyed me. So here's the thing that Israel didn't do. They didn't remove all of the distractions. They let some of the things from some of these other countries, some of these other nations, they let some of these other gods come into their lives. And they probably thought, well, it's harmless. It's not very different from what God says. And it began to mix and mingle. The second thing that caused was they took God off their radar. They removed God off their radar. Judges 2 says, Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110. After that, his whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors. Another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. What did that cause? Then the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and they served other gods. See, this is a part of Israel's history. It's a series of cycles that they get into. And it's not just a cycle of, they do the same thing over and over again. It's literally a cycle of things getting worse and worse and worse and worse. They keep moving downward in their behavior choices. Israel would become like the cultures of the world, and they would sin against God. And then God would allow them to be conquered or oppressed. And eventually the Israelites would go, wait, we don't like this. This is not the way we want to live life. And they would see the errors of their ways, and they would cry out to God for help, and they would repent. And then God would send a deliverer, a judge, and he would raise up this person who would come in and defeat the enemy in some miraculous way, and there would be a season of peace. And then sooner or later, that judge would die, and Israel would start the cycle all over again. So here's what was happening. Israel would go, wait, I don't want to live the way God wants me to live. I'm going to live slightly off center from the way God wants me to live. And it would continue to just snowball in their life. And then it would get to the point where Their life was so oppressed. Their life was so, they were captive to so many things, and they were miserable. And then they would go, hey, God, help me out. And God would go, okay, I'll help you out. I'll send a deliverer. But then it would go right back into the same cycle. They were simply refusing to value what God had done. They were simply not recognizing God's ability and God's authority. And many of them, again, were just blending God into their lives. It wasn't God had a position in their lives. It was like, okay, I have my work, I have my family, I have my fun, I have my hobbies, I have my entertainment. Oh, yeah, I have God. And they were just kind of blending him in as a piece of their lives. And the final concluding line of the narrative of Judges makes the third thing really clear. So, and it's this, Judges 21:25. In those days, Israel had no king, and everyone did as they saw fit. So here's why this happens. They took control. Now you think, well, why would they do that? No, let's not get judgy. Because isn't that what we do? It's my life. I'm in control. I call the shots. It's my life, right? For years, God himself had walked with man. Then he provides leaders like Abraham and Moses and Joshua to lead them. And now God has established them as a nation, as his people. And the question now becomes, will they follow him? Will they realize, will they tune into God? Will they trust, and in faith, will they follow God alone? And very quickly, you know what the answer became? No. We're going to do what's right in our own eyes. We're going to do it our own way. And they didn't recognize that actually God was leading them the whole time. They did not realize his power. They did not realize his authority. They did not realize his compassion and his kindness, that he was always doing that, and now he was just doing what he'd always done. They didn't take out all of the distractions. They didn't take out the things in their lives that caused them to look into other ways and to trust other things. They took God off their radar, and then they took control. That's what gets us to this place. And because of these three choices, continue to happen today. You look at society around you and you say, why is all of this happening? Why is there so much evil? Why is there so much bad? Why can't I watch the news without my head wanting to explode? Why? I just told you why. The same three reasons are in effect today. Is because we refuse to take out the distractions. We let things into our lives that should not be there. As small as they may seem, as safe as they may seem, they should not be there. And that causes us to take God completely off of our radar, and we're in control. We're calling the shots. And this doesn't just happen in the deplorable underbelly of a degenerate side of humanity. This is happening in everyday, all-encompassing human conditions. Even in those who claim to have been spiritually changed. But here's the good news. In the book of Judges, God raised up a judge, a deliverer that God would empower by his Spirit to bring God's glory and victory back to the forefront, and people would serve God for a season. You see it. Deborah, she comes in, and there's this great battle, and of course, yeah, there's that whole JL thing, and driving a tent peg through somebody's head. Again, true crime. What a series. And then there's 40 years of peace, right? And so this would go on and on. They would serve God for a season. And we're going to talk about one of those guys in just a minute. But I want to talk about in the season that you're in right now. In the season that you're in, since the arrival of Jesus onto this oxygenated dirt that we live, the process has changed. Yes, God sent a deliverer into the midst of broken people, just like he did in Judges. God sent Deborah, God sent Gideon, God sent Ehud, God sent Samson, God sent Jephthah. he sent them all in that season. In this season, he has sent a deliverer into the midst of broken people. But this time, the death was not centered on an enemy. The death was not centered on an enemy. It was centered on the one providing the victory. See, the deliverer that he would send back in the days of Judges would cause the death of the enemy. Now, the death was that of the victor. This time, the one bringing the miracle wasn't just raised up for one single battle. This time, Jesus was raised up on a cross to fight every battle over every enemy of sin and brokenness in our lives. He saved us from the cycle. He truly frees us from the slavery of sin, redeems the value that has been stripped from us, and restores us into a relationship with him. See, today in the church, this is called Palm Sunday. It was a triumphal procession as Jesus made his way into Jerusalem to die. And they applauded and they adorned him. But it wasn't the king they wanted. Jesus was coming to set up a spiritual place where people could find him, to be realigned with him, to be reconnected to him, and then live out his purpose. And this would mean that he would choose to die. This would mean that he would give himself. The enemies that the people wanted removed wouldn't be vanquished. Jesus would actually carry the weight of every enemy known to man to the cross, to give us total access to God and to his presence, not just for a season, not just for a few years, not just for a few days, but for eternity. But like in the book of Judges, people didn't want that type of king. See, that's what we face today. That's the first question that we have to really come to grips with this morning is, do I want that type of king? Do I want that type of deliverer? The one who does it for eternity. The one who doesn't just take the enemy out, but actually dies because I'm the enemy. I'm my own worst enemy. That's the true story of Palm Sunday. But let's go back to the book of Judges. Let's go back to Judges for a minute. This week, we meet a guy by the name of Gideon. Now, most people who have grown up in a church setting, you've heard different aspects of this guy's story, right? We know about when God called him a mighty warrior. We know about him placing fleeces down, which were sheep hides on the ground, and to see if God was going to be real. We know about the miraculous battle that he fought as God whittled his 32,000 men down to 300, and they go and they have horns and jars and torches, and they rout. Hello. What was that? Great. Please tell me that's a dove, God, like the Holy Spirit. I'm not shocked. The other day I walked into the back room and I turned around and I looked up and there was a squirrel sitting right there. I'm like, how did you get in here? All right. Hopefully you're not distracted. Get thee behind me, whatever you are. See, we've been taught that Gideon is a hero, right? That's kind of how we looked at it. Gideon's a hero. Gideon fights this big battle for God, right? He's a hero. But what if I told you that impression is not completely true? What if I told you that the old flannel graph that you learned in Sunday school didn't tell you the whole story? See, now I have your attention, huh? This morning, we're going to look at a guy who battles fear and insecurity. We're going to look at a guy who makes all kinds of excuses. We're going to look at a guy who really loses his temper. He gives into his pride, and he has a really hard time serving God the way he should. And in the middle of all of that, he's used by God in one of the most overmatched battles in the Bible. So this morning, we're going to look at what can we learn from Gideon's life and what questions should we be continually asking so that we can be ready in the moment that God meets us where we are and he asks us to do something great and purposeful for him. Because he will. I don't know if you realize this, but God is constantly working. God is not sitting off on a throne somewhere with a latte just going, I'm going to let this whole earth thing kind of spin out. We'll see how it ends. No, God is continually working, and he's not just working in the majors, he's actually working in every detail of your life. And there will come a time, there will come a moment where God will say, this is what I want you to do. Because we work in partnership with God. We're in partnership with him. We're not just pawns that he moves around the chessboard of life. We're actually working with him in life. So what do we need to be asking? How do we need to be looking at that? For 40 years, Israel had lived in peace under the care and leadership of Deborah. And it's very likely that Gideon had known what it was like to live in that season of peace. We think Gideon was probably in his mid-40s when we see him come on the scene. But for 7 years, he's been dealing with the oppression. And again, choices were made and a shift occurred. Here's what happens. Judges chapter 6. The Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and for 7 years he gave them into the hand of the Midianites. Because the power of Midian was so oppressive. I mean, think about this. I know there are times in our lives that we think, I cannot handle one more thing. Trust me, God and I have had that conversation. It's like, if you do one more thing, we're going to have words. But this is how bad it was. The Israelites prepared shelters for themselves in mountain clefts, caves, and strongholds. They were like not even living in their own houses. When things would get bad, they would run to the mountains and they would bury themselves. Midian so impoverished the Israelites that they cried out to the Lord for help. The Hebrew word for impoverished right there is the word dalal, which is means primarily that they were brought low or they were becoming weak. It actually means thin. Imagine just being worn down. Imagine just all of the friction wearing your life down to where you're just thin. That's what is being described here. It's often used in contexts where individuals or groups experience a reduction in strength or status or resource. The term describes physical, emotional, economic, and social depletion. That's how bad things are getting for the people of Israel. People are dealing with every kind of loss imaginable, and it's in this environment that God seeks out the hero of the story. Judges 6, the angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak in Ophrah. That is not Oprah, by the way. She has no part in this. Don't get it mixed up. Don't change your theology right there. Yeah. That belonged to Joash, the Abizrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a wine press to keep it from the Midianites. Notice what he's doing. He's threshing wheat in a place that they should be making wine so that he can hold on to it. When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon and he said to him, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Did you catch that? Did you catch that? Not the whole mighty warrior part, but where do we find this hero? He is hiding. He is hiding. He's hoarding. He's so fearful that he is doing the wrong thing in the wrong place. Now again, let's not get judgy, Because how many times when things come at us, we start doing the wrong things. We start grabbing on to the wrong things, and we start finding our hope in the wrong places. That's what is happening here in Gideon's life. And that's a pretty human response when things get bad. We make wrong choices. We go to places in our minds that we shouldn't. But this is where God meets Gideon. It's in that place. Some of you may be in that place right now where your mind is just going to the wrong places and you are struggling. You are fighting every day. And that is where God meets you. As we continue his story today, we're actually going to use some of the things not to do to empower our lives for God. So let me ask you a couple of questions this morning. Am I walking in God's potential or in my power? Am I walking in God's potential or in my power? The moment God shows up, he has a very different opinion of Gideon than Gideon does. Gideon is just a small town boy living in a lonely world. No, I'm sorry. That's a different story. As far as we know, Gideon has never fought a battle. We don't even know if he had a playground scuffle. Right? Everything we find in the text tells us that Gideon is a family man who is afraid, and he is just trying to keep his life together one more day. But God greets him as a mighty warrior. The word used here, it was only reserved for the best of the best. It spoke of a whole different level of ability and courage and valor. And it's no wonder that Gideon seems so confused. But this is what God sees. It's what God knows to be true. Because God is about to empower that in Gideon. Did you follow me? God says you are a mighty warrior. You have great ability, great opportunity, all of these things. And Gideon is going, thought I was the only one here. The reason God says that is because God knows he's going to empower those things in Gideon. See, what are the things that are in your life? What are the things that God already knows about you that he's going to empower? Oh, you may not feel them right now. You may not even understand them or know them right now. But God is saying, I see them because I'm about to empower them. So many times God sees and places things in our lives that are there for his use. We can go through years and seasons where things like this never happen and they're never known, but they're still there. And other times God gives them by his power, by the power of his Spirit for a very specific task or time. So here's what Gideon replies. Gideon goes, pardon me? Excuse me? Gideon said, but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all of his wonders that our ancestors told us about when they said, did not the Lord bring you up out of Egypt? Can you just hear this guy? The sarcasm is like dripping off of him right now. Did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and he's given us into the hand of Midian. Pardon me, my Lord. Gideon replied, how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh and I am the least in my family. Excuse me. God didn't keep his end of the bargain. Excuse me. This is more than I can handle. Excuse me, I'm a nobody. Excuse me, this is not my job. Excuse me, I am not equipped for this. I am not trained for this. I am not ready for this. Now, I know none of you have ever said those things. Isn't it funny, though, how the English language works? The word excuse, used to ask permission to pass through or to interrupt, is the same spelling as the word excuse. Excuse me, excuse me. The reasons that we make up in our minds so that we can pass by what God has in store for us, so that we can interrupt God's plans with our own issues. See, that's what's happening here. Gideon is saying, God, I have my own issues. I pass. Maybe you're not sure of what God is saying about you. Maybe today you say, I don't know, Ken. I don't know what God thinks. Then maybe you need to get into a quiet space and listen to him. Maybe you need to let him speak to your soul. Shut out what the world is screaming into your mind. Stop making excuses and asking God to excuse you from something that he desires to do in, for, and through you. But also let me remind you what God has said just a few generations earlier about those who choose to be completely faithful to him. I'm going to paraphrase Deuteronomy chapter 28 this morning. He says, if you fully obey God and you follow his commands, he will lift you above all nations and his blessings will follow you. Then he tells us what those are. You'll be blessed in spite of your geographic culture. Your children, your jobs, your resources will thrive. Your food, your provisions will be plentiful. You'll be blessed wherever you go. Your enemies will scatter before you. Your work and your preparation for the future will prosper. God will establish you as his people, and others will see his favor on you. God will provide what you need for growth. You'll lend to other people, and you won't need to borrow. You will lead. You will not follow. You will be at the top, never at the bottom. Stay faithful, follow his ways, and don't chase after other gods. That's what God says about you. That is what God is saying about each and every one of us in this room today. That's his promise. And let me add just a couple more biblical descriptions. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. You are never alone. You are his treasured possession. You are gifted, you are empowered, and you are protected. That's who you are today. With so many loud voices in the world, it matters who you listen to. But it also matters if you choose to operate in that truth. We have to choose to operate in that truth. So the next question is am I trusting God or am I testing God? Even after all that, Gideon wasn't convinced. God says, you're a mighty warrior. And Gideon goes, really? I don't think so. Judges 16:7, Gideon said, if now I have found favor in your eyes, give me a sign that this is really you talking to me. Give me a sign. Again, this is a portion of the Sunday school story that we slant to the side of optimism. We're like, oh yes, God needs to give us a sign. We need assurances. And we slanted it that way. The whole casting a fleece, we made that a spiritual discipline. And it is not. It is not. When you look at the story in the whole context of Gideon's experience in the book of Judges, Gideon's still responding in fear. He is actually testing God. The need for confirmation actually happens 3 times. Not 1, 3 times. Gideon said to God, if you will save Israel by my hand as you have promised, look, I will place a wool fleece on the threshing floor. If there is dew only on the fleece and all the ground is dry, then I will know that you have saved Israel by my hand. And that is what happened. That is what happened. So God did give him a sign. God then handles this fleece, and Gideon arose early the next day, and he squeezed the fleece, and he wrung out the dew, a bowl full of water. And then Gideon's going, let's do this again. Don't be angry with me. Do you see what he's doing? You see where his head is? He's like, I know this is wrong. Don't be mad at me, God. We're going to do this one more time. Let me make just one more request. Allow me one more test with the fleece. But this time, make the fleece dry and the ground will be covered with dew. Trying to trick God up, It's like, I know you can do this, but can you do that? And that night, God did so. Only the fleece was dry and all the ground was covered with dew. Now, maybe on the surface, this sounds like a reasonable thing to do. There's probably some of us in this room that are going, yeah, I do this all the time. I'm always asking God, show me a sign, show me something, show me something. What's wrong with that? Here's the problem. This was the very sort of thing that God told Israel not to do. Deuteronomy 6:16, do not put the Lord your God to a test as you did in Massa. All the Lord wants from Gideon, all the Lord wants from you and I is trust. And all Gideon does is he keeps testing. He keeps testing. Now let me be clear. I think doubts and questions are okay. It's a part of our growth process. But do you know the number one way that God moves you past your doubts? You know how God gets you past those things in your head that you just seem to get caught up in and struggle with? It's through faith that we learn to trust. It's through faith that we learn to trust. When you teach a little one to walk, there comes a time that you have to let go, and they will fall. When you teach them to ride a bike, there comes a time that you take the training wheels off, and you let go, and they will fall. Right? The only way we learn to fully trust God is by faith, is when we're not always needing something to assure us that it's going to be okay. That's trust. That is trust. Through the psalmist, he says this, God invites us to trust. Taste and see that I, the Lord, am good. Taste and see that any picky eaters in the house? Any picky eaters? There's two of us. Okay, great. There have been so many times that people are like, oh, here, try this. I'm like, what's in it? Oh, this and this. And I'm like, nope, no. Oh, come on, what do you say? Just taste it. Just taste it. We do this with our kids. Come on, just taste it. Just taste it. Taste and see that the Lord is good. You never know, right? You never know. You may like it. You know. By the way, I have tasted mustard. No, don't even come back to me. Don't anybody even come back to me on this one and go, have you tasted it? Yes, I have. Leave me alone. But you know what we say? Show and prove to me that you are good. No, God. I don't want to just taste and see. I don't want to take the chance that there's something that might not be what I want it to be. So you have to show me and prove to me that you're good before I step forward. That's not trust. When difficult times come, when opportunities arise, are we trusting God in faith and with faith? I know I'm running a little bit late, but I'll be really vulnerable and honest with you guys right now. I grew up with such strong faith, but I've never had it tested like I've had it tested right now. I actually sat with a couple of other ministers in our organization this week, and I said, every morning I have to pull myself into the sovereignty of God. I literally have to make myself think that God can do things. It's not coming easy to me right now. But it doesn't change the fact that he is. It doesn't change the fact that I now have to trust even more. And I now have to allow more faith to be exercised. I hate exercising, and I really hate exercising faith because it hurts. But are we trusting him, or are we testing him? Because then we have to decide, am I fulfilling my role, or am I relying on what's familiar? Because see, when I get to the place where I'm just testing God, I know what happens in my life. I go back to what's safe. I go back to what's easy. I go back to what's comfortable. The gist of Gideon's story that everyone knows about is this battle that takes place, right? This battle. God whittles down his army to 300 fearless, trusting men, and then he arms them with horns and jars and torches, and then he says, he gives them this unconventional battle plan. He goes, divide up 100, 100, 100, and you're going to go and you're going to surround the Midian camp, and then when Gideon tells you to, you are going to sound the horn, and you are going to shout, for the Lord and for Gideon. And 135 fighting men with weapons are going to go, okay, we're done. That is really unconventional. I don't know if there's ever been a battle fought like that before, or ever, except this one, right? But that was the plan. And here's what happened. They yelled, they crashed the jars, they sounded the horns, they lifted the torches, and 135 men turned on each other and killed each other for the most part. But over the next few days and a few miles, that happens. But the problem arises when Gideon begins to believe his own press. During his pursuit of two of the kings of Midian, Gideon feels that he's disrespected by his own people. And in his anger, he comes back and he tortures 77 men with thorns and briars. He literally, history tells us, took desert thorns and he turned them into ropes. And he whipped 77 men with these thorns, ripping their flesh right off of them. Told you it's a weird book. And then he kills all the men of another town out of anger. Because of his exploits, people want to make him a generational king, which he does refuse, but he does ask for honor. He asks for honor of his battle, and the people pay him tribute, which he fashions into something really weird. He fashions it into an ephod. He fashions it into a priestly garment. Instead of just making a little statue like everybody else had done, he makes a garment. It's about a role. It's about a position. And this was a garment that was worn by the high priest as a connection, the connection between God and man. What is Gideon saying? He's going, look, I am your connection to God. He couldn't wear the ephod. It weighed over 150 pounds. So he sets it up. He goes to his own hometown. He goes to the familiar place. He goes to the place where everybody knows him. You know, again, small town boy living in a lonely world. And he sets up this ephod in front of the whole town. And they begin to worship it. They begin to worship. I believe that the faith that Gideon had to go forward with 300 men could have won a lot more battles. But what is interesting about this is that the text makes it clear. If you go back to Gideon, or if you go back to Judges 6:8, it says that God had to send another prophet to get this whole process started. So Gideon wasn't the prophet in the story. Gideon wasn't the king in the story. He recognized that God was. And Gideon wasn't the priest in the story, although he created that impression that he was. See, Gideon tried to be what he wasn't meant to be. And that led to idolatry. So are we fulfilling the roles that God has us, or are we going back to these things that we know are easy, these things that we know are comfortable, these places that we know that people won't really push the limits with us? See, Gideon slipped back into the life of his father. Judges 6:25 says, that same night the Lord said to Gideon, take a second bull from your father's herd, the one 7 years old. That's an interesting number. We'll come back to that. Tear down your father's altar to Baal. Cut down the Asherah poles beside it. Then build a proper kind of altar to the Lord your God that on top of its height. Use the wood from the Asherah poles that you cut down to offer the second bull as a burnt offering. So Gideon took 10 of his servants and did as the Lord told him. But because he was afraid of his family, watch this. Because he was afraid of his family and the townspeople, he did it at night rather than the daytime. See, as God prepares us for his best in our lives, he asks us to give him everything. He asked us to give him everything. Notice the age of the bull, 7 years. How many years had Midian oppressed Israel? 7. 7. See, we need to give him all the hurts. We need to give him all the brokenness of our lives. That's what God is asking for. God is not asking us to hold on to the things that are holding us back. God is not asking us to hold on to the things that even sometimes our hurts can be our comforts. We get used to being that way. And God is saying, no, I want everything from your life. We need to rip out and replace all of the places of worship in our lives that are not to God. Those old things need to become the fodder and the fuel for our passion for God. And we need to live and operate with confidence because this gospel life is a public life. It's not done in the dark. When opportunities come our way, many times we look for a no-risk guarantee. But actually, the calling that God has on our lives, on all of our lives, is a God-guaranteed risk. We want the no-risk guarantee. God, make my life easy. And God's saying, no, I'll give you a guaranteed risk. I'll guarantee that I'm going to be there in the risk. 100% guarantee that God is working in your life. I'm going to ask the team to come. Say, Ken, there's no such thing as that guarantee. 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 3. Everything we could ever need for life and godliness has already been deposited in us by his divine power. There's your guarantee. What do you need in your life right now? What do you need in the moments of your life? What do you need in the struggles of your life? What do you need in the oppression of your life? What do you need even in the celebration of your life? It's there. Just like what God saw in Gideon, God is wanting to call some of those things out in your life. He was like, but I don't know. He will empower those things. By his divine power, those things are there. This was lavished upon us through the rich experience of knowing him who has called us by name and invited us to come to him through a glorious manifestation of his goodness. As a result of this, he has given you his magnificent promises. There's your 100% guarantee. God is not a man that he should lie, nor the son of man that he should change his mind. What he says, he will do. God promised these things would be in your life. There's no revoking that. So that through the power of these promises, we can experience, watch this, partnership with him. Well, you're not excited about that, I guess. Partnership. In other words, we get to work with God as he works in and through us, giving us ability over the corrupt desires of the world. So devote yourself to adding to your faith. And since those virtues are already planted deep within you, this is not surface stuff, and you possess them in abundant supply. You're like, this week I was a little short on patience. This week I was a little short on kindness. That's on you. That's not on God. That's on us. That's how much we tapped into. But since they're there in abundant supply, they will keep you from being ineffective and fruitless in your pursuit of knowing Jesus Christ more intimately. See, with this guarantee from God, you can enter into the risky obedience of attempting things that are impossible unless God gives you the strength to do them. With this guarantee from God, you can enter into the risky obedience of loving other people and proving to the world that God's love is flowing through you. With this guarantee from God, you can enter into obedience, changing your priorities to match God's, sacrificing in faith. Maybe you're in a place, I'm going to ask you to stand with me. Maybe this morning you're in a place where you're just trying to make it. That's where Gideon was. Gideon's like, see what's on the docket today. I'm going to go hide myself. And I'm going to do whatever I can do and keep whatever I can keep just to make it through another. That's where you are today. That's fine. because of the life of Christ and the power of the Holy Spirit, I want you to understand that God describes you differently today. He describes you as loved, as powerful, as whole. So are you truly trusting God? Or are you trying to find assurances before you step into it? And will you step by faith into the places that God can use you and let go of the familiar? Today, as the team worships, I'm going to ask you to again, we talk about Gideon and his battle, Gideon and his fight. You know where that fight started? It started at the threshing floor. Because God showed up kind of like God has done this morning. And there's Gideon doing what he shouldn't be doing, where he shouldn't be doing it, and feeling sorry for himself. God says, listen, that's not you. That's not me. That's not what I have for you. And here's where the battle started. You ready? The first step out of the threshing floor. You gotta take it. You gotta take it. If you want God to fight that battle with you, you gotta step in the space. So this morning, I'm going to give you that opportunity, both figuratively and literally, to step out in this moment, to step forward into a place that's hard. I understand it. It's hard. And there'll be a fight. But God is with you, mighty warrior. And if you'll just step into this moment and say, okay, God, here I am. No fleeces, just faith. I need you to work in my life. There's probably going to be someone that'll step up and pray with you. It's not going to be anything demonstrative. It's not going to be anything embarrassing. They're just going to join their faith with yours. But today, there's some battles that need to be fought. God's ready to fight for you.